youth to 35. The debates that transpired over the last 2 days within the venue that is located within the Cape Town City Hall. I am now joined by the Chairperson of International Relations and Cooperation, Honorable or Chairperson Supra Maumapelo. Sir, welcome and thank you for joining us this morning.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you very much for being on the platform here today.
Just before we get to the list of our questions this morning, what was your experience of the State of the Nation Address 2022?
Well, it was a usual experience, nothing extraordinarily different from what one has experienced in the past. Of course, the new situation, the variable which was new in the equation was the fact that Parliament has banned and we had to shift to the city center. And for us, it's not a problem because the most important thing is for us to listen to the president, take the necessary notes, compare what he says with what South African policy is on various areas, make sure that we internalize the speech, make sure that we are able to impart the understanding of the speech to whoever asks us about the speech, and be critical where we need to be critical about the speech. So the most important thing would have been how South Africans have received the speech. So it's not more about ourselves as members of Parliament, it's more about the people themselves out there. But it was a good experience. Of course, the numbers had to be reduced because of COVID, also because of the venue. And for the first time, we did not hear in the procession. You know, every time is they will say the speaker, and later they will say members of the judiciary, and later on acknowledge like that speakers and so on. So it was slightly toned down a little bit, nothing different basically.
Thank you, sir, for those responses. You are the chairperson, the portfolio chairperson of the International Relations and Cooperation Committee. Sir, what is the focus of this committee when it comes to the work of Parliament?
Well, remember that all of us members of Parliament here, we come on the basis of what I can call a dual mandate. So we use the political party PR system in the country, but as soon as we got sworn in as members of Parliament, then we are also accountable to the people, which means that part of our responsibility through the portfolio committees is to represent consistently the views of the masses, of the people, and make sure that we hold accountable in line with the Constitution of the Republic, the executive, and do everything in our power to ensure that we represent the aspirations of the people. So as a portfolio committee on international relations, we focus on several things. Among others is to make sure that the policy position that is presented overseas, internationally, by the department, by missions abroad, is the policy positions that is correct in line with what South Africa has developed. Two, is to make sure that we interact with other countries all over the world, those who are in Parliament, our counterparts, and make sure that we we are in par in as far as understanding the international dynamics are concerned in as far as oversight is concerned. But thirdly, it's important for us as the portfolio committee to make sure that at the center of the work that we do, we put the masses of our people. Now, the people in South Africa, they are in organizations, they are institutions, they are individuals themselves, as they are allowed by the Constitution to participate in our democratic processes. So the society is also able to contact us as the portfolio committee and talk to us directly about what they think is important and is supposed to be done. We've got the power to call the minister, the deputy ministers. We can call even the administration within the department, the director general, including the rest of them who are in the administration. We can call ambassadors. We can send questions. We can make inquiries if needs be. The committee has got the power in terms of the Constitution to summon, but you only summon when you have exhausted all other mechanisms at your disposal as a committee. So that's what we do. But we also look at the trade relationship, which is based on agreements that are entered into by South Africa with other countries of the world. And we make sure that at the center of everything that we do in terms of our oversight is to check if the department is applying democratic value system of South Africa, but also linked to that, our non-racial, non-sexist character has to find expression in that. We must also, we look at whether the department is indeed making sure that we are not seen as an island in the African continent. We work with other countries in the African continent because we are Africans, we are in Africa. So we need to build that solidarity, not only in Africa, but the entire world. So that's what we do in as far as doing oversight on the executive is concerned.
Chairperson, the president stated that the African Union summit actually has resolved that the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, a free trade area agreement is going to kick in right now. Can the chairperson tell us as viewers and as South Africans, what is this agreement going to mean to the ordinary person of South Africa?
It's very important. The unity of Africa is very important, but it can't just be unity on paper. It has to be unity expressed practically. So one of the practical expressions of that unity of Africa is what the president has announced around free trade in the African continent. So we welcome it. That is number one. Number two, it will be important for South Africans and the rest of the African continent to know and understand that this free trade agreement, which the AU says is now going to commence and is committed to, is going to be implemented in a particular environment. And that particular environment, I'll just give you a few things which we have to be aware of, because it doesn't mean that because heads of states have pronounced it, we are going to instantly be able to achieve the objectives that have been outlined in the free trade agreement in the African continent. The one matter that we have to know as South Africans and as Africans is the infrastructure backlog, right, in the African continent. And it can become an impediment if, as part of making sure that we trade well, we do not address that infrastructure backlog. Now, the infrastructure backlog will have elements like rail. So you need not only the construction of rail, but also to make sure that we renew and sustain the rail network throughout the African continent for the ease movement of goods. The second thing is to deal with the challenges of energy in the African continent. Energy production, energy supply. If there is no certainty in as far as energy supply is concerned, you are going to have some of the investments which are supposed to come here into the African continent, investors being a bit hesitant in coming into the African continent. The third thing around infrastructure is ICT. We need an ICT network throughout the African continent so that traders, the people of Africa, those who want to invest in the African continent, connectivity can be a bit easier. And those who are trading can be able within seconds to transact with the African continent. Linked to that will be the banking sector. The banking sector infrastructure, in as far as financial services is concerned, will have to be attended to. The fourth thing are problems of global warming. If we, as we say and we agree, that there's going to be trade in the African continent, and we do not bring together our collective wisdom as the African continent and agree to implement the global implications of globalization in as far as matters of the environment are concerned, there's going to be problems. So environmental degradation is something that we'll have to attend to as part of making sure that the trade goes well. But there's also problems of stability in the African continent. Trade will not be able to grow and be sustained if we do not make sure that there's stability in the African continent. As we speak now, there are about 3 to 4 coups that have taken place in the African continent. And as part of pushing this trade forward, the African Union, in our view as the Portfolio Committee, will have to, at all material times, make sure that different states are engaged to make sure that there's no coups that are taking place in the African continent. But secondly, to make sure that the population, the people in the 54 countries in the African continent get to understand that for trade to take place, in order for growth to happen, creation of jobs and so on, there has to be stability. But you also need efficiency. If you go to the ports in the African continent and you want to grow trade, and you've got all these problems of inefficiencies that accompany the existence of our ports, you are going to have a problem. We also hope that our leaders in the African Union can make sure that they attend to different economic systems that exist in the African continent, because you need a bit of harmonization, which is not homogeneity. Harmonization is not homogeneity. So you can still have different approaches of economic system, but you must harmonize them. Because if the economic systems are not interlinked, they're not working together and so on, it's going to be a barrier to trade within the African continent. We must also have the skills. We should be able to say the agenda of skills development in the entire African continent has to be based on the needs of Africa's economy. So from a research point of view, there has to be thoroughgoing assessment of the development of the African economy and what its needs are, so that when we develop a curriculum in schools and we do skills development and so on, there has to be in consort with the challenges that we face in as far as the need for skills is concerned in the African continent. But you also have other challenges which we must attend to. There's tribalism that is going on, ethnicity in the African continent. Those are the undercurrents that we have to deal with, the subjective factors within the African continent, because if you don't, they will then become inhibitors of growth and disintegration of the African continent. Another problem, which I hope our leaders will attend to, in as far as this free trade in the African continent is concerned, is neo-colonialism. Because the former colonizers of countries within the African continent still wants to control. They still want to have a hold, particularly on the minerals in the African continent. So Africa will have to say, how do we make sure that we sufficiently do necessary insulation and have an African agenda that is not influenced by colonialism, which currently is neo-colonialism, because if countries like France and Britain and so on are going to want to continue to dictate the agenda for the African continent, you are bound to have differences amongst the African countries, because the influence that comes from outside may actually lead into differences among the African countries, and therefore there will be tension and there will be conflict. But where will that coming from? From external forces, because of economic interest based on minerals such as oil, gold, platinum, chrome, and all other strategic minerals in the African continent. The market-driven approach, marketism, must also be attended to by the AU, because the market-driven approach is brutal. What it wants is profit and nothing else. So as we do this trade in the African continent, we must make sure that we push an agenda of trade that is driven by Ubuntu. So we shouldn't do and drive trade at the expense of humanity, because without that humanity being stable itself and benefiting from the trade, there's going to be instability. So those are some of the things that I think my sister, while we welcome the free trade agreement approach in the African continent, we think it's progressive, it's revolutionary, it's the right thing to do. We hope it will also be introduced in the curriculum in the school, so that young people can understand the genesis, the importance, and the centrality of having to trade among ourselves as Africans. So we welcome it.
Chairperson Maupela, with the coups that Maupelo, with the coups that, my apologies, sir, with the 4 coups that have taken place in Africa, and the trade now that has been agreed to continue or to be implemented, how will this then affect the movement of people? Because we know if a coup happens in one of the African countries, it kind of snowballs into the neighboring countries. So with these 4 coups that have taken place, how do you foresee them impacting on the movement of citizens across the continent?
We have a full confidence. We've got full confidence as the Portfolio Committee in the leadership of Africa, different countries, through the African Union, to address some of these destabilizing factors. And we are very happy that we as South Africa, we believe that we must resolve both continental, international challenges through engagement in order to achieve peace. So there are very encouraging discussions between South Africa through our president, and also through the other countries in the continent, through regional bodies. Those discussions are taking place. We must bring peace so that the people can understand that those discussions, because they are taking place, there's going to be a resolution of the conflict. The coups will be brought to an end. We entrench democracy. As soon as people get to know that that is getting resolved, the tension that then forces people to migrate based on anxiety, based on fear that they will lose their property, they will lose their lives, families are going to be dispersed all over and so on, that fear will begin to dwindle. That is why the media like yourself, in each one of the countries involved, and in the entire African continent, it's important for you to be closer to the developments in the African Union and how problems are being resolved, so that you can consistently, as the media, communicate developments which are positive from the efforts that have been taken by our leaders to make sure that we stabilize the situation in those particular countries. Because the next step, which people have to be clear about, is that elections are going to take place. So as part of the transition from these coups that are taking place, after agreements have been reached and based on those particular agreements, the transition to full democracy will then have to be embarked upon. And I've got no doubt that we will be able to overcome those problems that we are facing, of course, in the African continent, because they destabilize the countries, they affect the economy, they affect the free flow of goods and services among the people, but also they send a very bad image internationally about the African continent. So as soon as Africa, we come together and we make sure that we bury the hatred and we make sure that we stabilize the continent, what you are raising will not happen, because the people of Africa going forward will only be focusing on development, on growth, on sustainability, on making sure that peace prevails forever in the African continent.
Thank you, Chairperson. That brings us now to the question that with the trade agreement getting implemented, what oversight mechanisms will the committee put in place to ensure that this agreement is implemented effectively and it speaks to the economic growth of the South African market?
On a consistent, regular basis, as the portfolio committee, we will be talking to the minister to say, Minister, here's an agreement reached in as far as free trade is concerned in the African continent. We will expect that on a quarterly basis, on an annual basis, we get the report on progress that we are making in that regard. So that is the first thing. The second thing is that we ourselves as the portfolio committee, the expectation is that in Parliament, during the debates, during the submission of reports and so on, we will be updating Parliament on the results that come from our own analysis and assessment as the portfolio committee on the concrete results that are beginning to emerge from this agreement that is made in the AU for the African continent. Thirdly, we have a responsibility as the portfolio committee to link up with our fellow parliamentarians in the rest of the African continent to have a discussion on the extent to which their respective countries are moving towards the implementation of the free trade agreement. Fourthly, the organized business throughout the African continent. We will be making sure as the portfolio committee that we interact with them. They can be in mining, they can be in engineering, in tourism, in various fields of the economy. We will be talking to them to hear from them what is their view in as far as this is concerned. Fifthly, there are universities in the African continent. Intellectual capital is embedded in the universities and the colleges. So we are going to be making sure that we interact with various universities to say to them, because you deal with matters of rigor in as far as academia is concerned. How are you assessing and looking at this matter of free trade in the African continent? But sixthly, there are institutions that are existing, it's research institutions and so on, and other organizations. We will be bringing them on board and saying to them, how from your perspective, are you looking at this free trade agreement? Is it progressing well? What are the challenges? And do you think the manner in which we are dealing with the challenges is enough for us to then say indeed we are making tangible progress.
We would like to attach the trade as well to the e-visa system that has currently been implemented in our country. Chairperson, regarding the e-visa system, how effective has it been since its implementation? Because we know that it seeks to invite foreign investors, it seeks to invite also tourism. So looking from the period that it has been implemented, are you satisfied or are you not satisfied with the results that are currently before the Committee on International Relations?
Africa has got about 1.3 billion or so. And for us to make sure that our economy grows as the South African people, as the South African government, but also for Africa, we must make it easier. Firstly, for Africans to trade among themselves, to transact among themselves. And you can only achieve that if you improve the movement of people. It has to be smooth, it has to be efficient, it must be appreciated by everybody to say, indeed, we are doing well as South Africa, which is part of the African continent. But at the same time, we are not an insulated country. We are part of the global village. Therefore, the e-visa system is one of the tools we are using to make sure that we improve company-to-company relations, to people-to-people relations, state-to-state relations, and institution-to-institution relations. People shouldn't struggle to access South Africa and vice versa. We are happy with the strides that have been made so far. This is a new system. It is still going to encounter some teething problems there and there, but so far we have checked various few countries, and the mere fact that it's introduced, various countries, Germany, Britain, we had the ASEAN countries that we met last week. They are excited, they are elated that South Africa is now moving towards the e-visa system, which is going to eradicate all the bureaucracy, including the corruption which accompanied some of the transactions that were taking place to make sure that we process people coming into the country and out of the country. Tourism is going to benefit, particularly. Not only tourism, there are farmers who come from Brazil, who come from Netherlands, who come from Canada, who wants to come into South Africa. On a weekly basis, for instance, there are auctions on livestock taking place throughout the country in South Africa. There are farmers that move from Australia on a weekly basis just to come for an auction. So some of them are saying they are very happy that the cumbersomeness, which then accompanied the former system, is now being replaced by the new system, which is technology related.
Thank you, Chairperson. Earlier on during the conversation, as we were talking about this free trade agreement that has happened and it's about to be implemented, you highlighted on one of the critical issues, the climate change. With the climate change happening, why is it such an important aspect within the South African foreign policy?
Humanity destroys the environment. It's not the other way around. It's not the environment that destroys humanity. I know we always complain that there's too much of heat, there's too much of rain and all those things. Those things are happening because of the actions by humanity. One of the things that impacts on the environment, for instance, is industrialization. Industrialization is necessary, but we have to industrialize in a way that saves and sustains the environment. That is why we are happy with the COP's resolutions that have been taken, to which countries have committed to make sure that we stop environmental degradation. You can't grow and sustain any economy when you allow that economy to self-destruct. So growth that does not sustain the environment is unproductive growth. And we are happy as the portfolio committee that entire nations in the world have now come to a realization that yes, we must grow economies, yes, we must develop industries, but it shouldn't be at the expense of ourselves as humanity. Because if you do that and you only push greed, profit at all times, and that happens at the expense of the environment, it means future generations will be doomed and they will not inherit productivity that helps to sustain the environment, which means future generations 50, 100 years from now will struggle to grow economies because we will have destroyed what exists. So we are very happy that South Africa is leading the path in saying big countries like France, like Germany, the US, Canada, all these industrialized countries must realize the extent to which they are destroying the environment. But linked to that, we will be happy if the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, the Department of Environment, and all other related departments here in the country can also begin to work together and do away with siloism, where silo mentality is informing our approach to dealing with challenges of environment. For instance, in my view, we may want to consider going forward to make, in our curriculum in schools, to make environmental education compulsory so that young people, when they start from grade R, remember those are the ones who are going to make sure that there's factories in future. We must make them aware from as early as grade R to make sure that they understand why it's important to preserve the environment. So if our leaders can do that, if they can implement that, educate our people and not run out of patience to educate, I think we'll go far as a country and as a continent.
I think what you've just alluded to, Chairperson Maumapelo, is the issue that once we start teaching our children from an early age what it means to care for the environment, those are things that are ingrained and they grow up with. I think most of the families and society in our communities, their children attend the new Model C schools, and you try and throw a paper outside your car window, the first thing that your child will bring to you, please pick up that paper. You're not supposed to do that. Because already in some of the schools, this is the culture that is being inculcated in our children. But coming back as well to the free trade, it's an African free trade, but on the other hand, we also form part of the global family. Having these two together, I know that the chairperson and the committee, you also look into the African Renaissance Fund as well as the International Cooperation Fund. Can the chairperson give us an insight as to what these funds are all about? What programs are they directed to?
It is very important for South Africans to understand that we are part of Africa. It's very important for us to understand that from our fiscus, there is money that comes out and it goes into the African Renaissance Fund. The African Renaissance Fund assists through international relations to make sure that the commitments that we make as South Africa, in as far as Africa is concerned and other progressive states like Cuba are concerned, we must make a contribution to those particular countries. Because if we don't make a contribution through the African Renaissance Fund, we will not be true to our commitment to make sure that we are part of the African continent. So I'll make you an example. We are contributing to the problems of hunger that are facing Cuba. So these problems of hunger that are facing Cuba, South Africa has entered into an agreement on how to deal with some of the problems that are facing Cuba. We've got cultural relations, educational, defense, and so on, relationship agreement with Cuba. And the African Renaissance is being used, for instance, to help ameliorate some of the challenges that are facing the Cuban people and the state of Cuba. In the African continent, there's a lot of work that we are doing. I'll make you an example. It's not only the African Renaissance. So if you take the African Renaissance and you take all other contributions that we make, for instance, through our defense force, to make sure that we maintain peace in Africa, to make sure that the entire world can realize that Africa is at one and South Africa is part of the work to make sure that there's stability in the African continent. Those monies are being used there. That's why I always say to people who complain that we can't forget easily that before 28 years ago, some of our own mothers, our own fathers, our brothers, our sisters were being taken care of by some of the countries, including Cuba, including other countries in the African continent like Zambia and so on. Therefore, we must reciprocate. And I always say to members of the portfolio committee that part of our philosophy must be reciprocative oversight philosophy, so that we must not forget and we have memory lapse on what those other countries have done to assist South Africa going forward when we face the dark days of colonialism and apartheid. Of course, there must be accountability. So we make sure that the ministry accounts on how the African Renaissance Fund is being used. And we do that by also reporting to Parliament. The department reports on the African Renaissance Funds. It accounts to the Auditor General. And so far, we must applaud the department for the manner in which they have consistently been reporting on how the African Renaissance Funds is being used. And by and large, the Auditor General's office is happy with the work that is being done there and the accountability thereof.
Chairperson, Mr. Maumapelo, I wish we had more time just to dwell and also get an opportunity to zoom into the International Cooperation Fund. But due to time, say thank you so much for your time. I think we've actually got to understand better what international relations and cooperation is all about. We wish you all the best for the year and for the day today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and good luck to you. I'll come again in future if you want to have additional interviews. Thank you.
Thank you. Viewers at home, that was the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on International Relations and Cooperation, Chairperson Supra Maumapelo. You have learned what the African Renaissance Fund is all about and also what is the African trade all about. So stay tuned with us as we go and look at this clip.
Infrastructure is central to our economic reconstruction and recovery. Through innovative funding and improved technical capabilities, we have prioritized infrastructure projects to support economic growth and better livelihoods, especially in energy, roads, and water management. The Infrastructure Fund is at the center of this effort with the 100 billion rand allocation from the fiscus. The Infrastructure Fund is now working with state entities to pair pipeline projects with an investment value of approximately 96 billion in student accommodation, social housing, telecommunications, water and sanitation, and transport. Several catalytic projects to the value of 21 billion are expected to start construction this year. Of this, 2.6 billion is contributed by government and the balance is financed by the private sector and development funding institutions. Government will make an initial investment of 1.8 billion in bulk infrastructure, which will unlock 7 private sector projects to the value of 133 billion. For millions of South Africans in rural areas, roads and bridges provide access to markets, to employment opportunities, to families and social services. Yet many children still have to brave overflowing rivers to reach schools, and motorists have to battle impassable roads to reach the next town. One person was telling me that they now have to drive on the side of the road because many roads are so bad. We are therefore upscaling the Welisizwe Rural Bridges Program to deliver 95 bridges a year from the current 14. Our South African National Defence Force is the implementing agent of the Welisizwe program and has demonstrated the expertise of the SANDF engineers in bridge construction. Earlier this week, I was in Tahalane village in Limpopo to launch a new road that is going to make a huge difference in the lives of neighboring communities. This road was constructed using block paving and other materials, which is a method that enables us to build durable roads faster and more cost effectively. I would like to see a situation where many of the roads that we have in our country, particularly in our township areas, in our rural areas, and in outlying areas, being paved, because paving is so much cheaper than using asphalt. The Rural Roads Program will use labor-intensive methods to construct or upgrade nearly 700 kilometers of rural road over the next few years. This social enterprise program includes access to roads in Limpopo, in the Eastern Cape, and to move from gravel to surface upgrades in the Free State, in Northwest, and capacity connectivity improvements in the Western Cape. Government has initiated the process of delivering the Umzimvubu water project. The project is made of a number of dams. The Ntabelanga Dam, the Lalini Dam, an irrigation infrastructure and hydroelectric plant, Ntabelanga water treatment works and bulk distribution infrastructure to reticulate to the neighboring communities. Now, the closing date for the first of the two-stage procurement process is scheduled to close later this year, with a preferred bidder likely to be announced later this year as well. Government is introducing an innovative social infrastructure delivery mechanism to address issues that afflict the delivery of school infrastructure. The mechanism will address the speed, the financing and funding, quality of delivery, mass employment and maintenance. We still need to build some 2,500 or so schools in our country, and using current budgetary methods or processes, it'll probably take us 75 years to close that gap. However, with the new innovative mechanisms for delivery and financing, we should be able to do it much sooner. The delivery mechanism will introduce a special purpose vehicle working with prominent DFIs and the private sector to deliver school education infrastructure, with government obviously continuing to finance the building of schools. This approach is being piloted in schools in the Northern Cape and in the Eastern Cape, and will soon move also to other provinces, Limpopo and many other provinces.
Welcome back. You are watching Parliament's coverage of the President's reply to the debate on the State of the Nation Address 2022. As we build up to that time at 2 o'clock, please note that we are also streaming live on Parliament's YouTube channel. Follow Parliament across social media platforms as follows. Follow Parliament on Twitter, Facebook, and on Instagram. Our handle is @Parliament of RSA.
We have a
Colleagues,
few
we are
minutes.
back, getting ready for the President to reply to all the exciting comments and questions that were made over the last 2 days.
Indeed.
We have a few minutes from President taking the podium and responding to the rigorous debate that took place in the last 2 days. But from the clip now, we just heard President making some good announcement, you know, especially with the Welisizo Rural Bridge Program, which is being implemented by the South African National Defence Force. You would have seen you would have seen the Defence Force in the past, you know, building these bridges and in our rural communities. And we know with the recent heavy rains in the Eastern Cape and other parts of the country, we saw that our rural communities, old, or if they do even exist, we need those bridges because people were unable to get out of their villages and go to town or go look for opportunities, you know. So I commend the president because he's indicated that they're looking at increasing that number. I think it's over about 500% because it's from about 17 to 90 bridges.
You said 90 bridges, yes.
90 bridges a year that they're planning to build. So that's a great infrastructure rollout.
Yeah. Absolutely. So when we just reflect on the conditions, or especially in the rural communities where infrastructure development is not obviously on par as compared to the kind of infrastructure that you have in cities and towns, in metros and towns, that is really an important commitment that the undertaking that the president is making, also indicating that infrastructure is of course positioned as a key component as part and parcel of the economic reconstruction and recovery plan, and over and above communities benefiting from the infrastructure. There's also job opportunities that will be coming through for all of those people that are residing within those communities. So absolutely, absolutely an important undertaking, because obviously it's going to improve the quality of life for the rural poor and those who actually need to cross, who need to walk around long distances where there's no bridges over the rivers. So an important undertaking indeed.
And I'm sure, Sibo, that will also come in handy for the learners in those rural areas, because we do know that some walk long distances and sometimes they are unable to reach their schools because they are unable to cross a certain river. There's no bridge. We've seen visuals also in the part of learners having to really cross. You can see them benceda-ncedana, abanye kukhulula impahla zibekwe ecaleni kuba kuzanywa uncedo, abanye bebelekana, and you can imagine the risk that comes with that, because siyawazi amanzi ukuthi anobungozi kangakanani. Nasibonile East London, and as I had earlier indicated, other parts of the country, from the heavy rains of the past few weeks, cars like Zichona, Kunzima, Udlula, and all that. Now you can imagine if we have kids that must still cross those rivers. So it is this rural, this infrastructure project is really welcome, and I'm sure that people from the rural, the rural areas, we welcome it because President has specifically mentioned the provinces that really need serious attention, where government plans to build 700 kilometers. That's a lot, 700 kilometers of these rural roads in Limpopo, Free State, the Northwest, Eastern Cape, and some parts of the some rural parts of the Western Cape.
And this actually agrees with what the chairperson of the International Relations was saying, Chairperson Maumapelo, when he said that much as South Africa or the African continent has this trade agreement in place, but there are certain things that are going to hinder the progress or the fast pace of this trade happening. One of them was the rail, and the second one was the roads. So as you were saying, Sibulelo, the infrastructure, the road infrastructure, the rail infrastructure, all of them are critical if you want to see the economy grow. Because you may have all the resources, you may have the mineral resources, you may have a good farm, but if you cannot reach or get to where the market is, it becomes a waste of resources at your disposal, and also loss of funds and
Absolutely.
time.
So when we also just reflect back on where road infrastructure is located within the broader scheme of economic recovery. This is part and parcel of the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan, which the President has reiterated and affirmed as the key policy construct that is going to be used for the rest of the medium-term strategic framework period in order to guide the country forward and to accelerate growth, inclusive economic growth and transformation. And we've also heard quite a number of inputs around structural reforms in particular. Remember, we inherited an unequal society whereby the bulk of the economy actually resides in the hands of the few. So with the structural reforms through the project Vulindlela, which was announced by the President in his 2021 State of the Nation address, is precisely about easing the burden of doing business. And it's really about ensuring that you do away or make it easier for those marginalized, previously marginalized communities or SMMEs or those who want to come into the mainstream economy to be able to do business and come into the mainstream economy. So in relation to just emphasizing what the key policy construct is, it still stands as the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan, and it covers multiple aspects of growth and development, including, of course, issues of road infrastructure, including, of course, it's about defeating the coronavirus as well. It's about social employment or public employment. It is about making sure that the country is able to navigate its way out of this current phase where we are right now. And it requires the participation and the commitment of all social partners to come on board and make sure that they make their contribution so that we can take the country forward.
Well, yes, and Valerie, I can hear, sorry, Sibu, I can hear the bells
ringing. The bells are ringing.
Which is an indication that we are only few minutes away,
literally,
before that sitting, before the President replies to the 2 days of debate. As you can see on our screen, members getting seated, we are coming to you live from Cape Town in the Cape Town City Hall. It has been declared the parliamentary precinct following the fires that ravaged the parliament, in particular parts of the old assembly. On your screen is the President, together with the deputy president, the chief whip of the ANC in the National Assembly, and the deputy chief whip, Ms. Doris Dlagule. So the President looks ready to respond, and we can expect to hear a lot of responses from what the members raised during the 2 days.
And in particular, one of the issues that I think needs to be highlighted as well was the misconception that the President was saying that government will not, is literally giving over the responsibility to create jobs to the public sector, to the private sector. And that has, if we've heard, we're just reflecting on yesterday's debate, we have heard it quite reiterated quite clearly that yes, government is going to create a conducive environment, but government is still participating in the process of job creation by not only creating a conducive environment, but through structural reforms as well to make it easier for those who were previously marginalized to come into the mainstream economy. But of course, I think that's one of the key issues that the president will be highlighting in his speech. It's about clarifying as well that misconception that government is abdicating, that the president is abdicating responsibility, which is not the case. And it was reiterated and clarified by various speakers of the African National Congress who participated in yesterday's debate.
And I think, Sibu, if 80% of jobs is created by private sector, then President might not really, because we've got the percentages, and if it's 80%, then it should be really an indication on if you open up and take away the red tape and enable private sector to invest so that we can have more jobs, because that is what also the economic reconstruction and recovery plan seeks to achieve. It is the creation of jobs. So we wait and hear how the president is going to respond to that, because as you had rightfully indicated, it has been raised a number of times in the House. It has caused, debate, and the members, others claiming that the president was talking from their key policy priorities, others saying that president has outsourced the responsibility of creating jobs. So it would really be bad for the president to clarify. As you can see on your screen, there he's sitting, and on his right is the deputy president of the country, Mr. D.T. Mabuza, and on his left is the chief whip of the ANC in the National Assembly, Ms. Penny Matrodina.
Indeed, if we also think further, just reflect a little bit more about some of the key concepts that came out, it's that of Parliament's constitutional responsibility to exercise oversight over the executive. And we have heard very emphatic pronouncements about what Parliament in particular will be doing in terms of ensuring that it plays its oversight role. And we've heard also the Deputy Speaker and the Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces make that commitment about reviewing not only the oversight model, but also the thinking and the paradigm shift in relation to how Parliament does oversight, and that there is an urgent need right now to ensure that when Parliament does oversight, that oversight is indeed impact-based, and that it is indeed is able to make a difference in the lived realities of people on the ground.
I think what also came out from the debates over the last 2 days, almost from all the political parties, even the ruling party itself, there is an admission to say oversight has not really been yielding quality results. So hence the conference that is coming in March on oversight is to close those loopholes that also have allowed the corruption to be at the extent or at the level that it has been, as proven by the Zondo Commission reports that were delivered sometime early in the year, the 2 reports. So everybody seems to be agreeing that we have not done as we were expecting. And one of the political parties yesterday did allude to the fact that the mechanisms are there. The mechanisms are there. So Parliament members, the members of Parliament, they need to utilize those mechanisms that are before them.
So doesn't that also then indicate that in terms of, if we are just looking at reviewing the entire debate itself, it was a very balanced debate.
Indeed.
Because we have got concessions. I mean, there's obviously a clear indication that even from the African National Congress, that we are not saying that that everything is perfect, but obviously there's a need, there's room for improvement.
And Sibo, we can run away also from the fact or the impact of COVID-19.
Absolutely.
Because had we not gone through that, we cannot really know where we would be standing right now. It could have been that things could have improved for the better.
Totally agree.
And also COVID-19, as much as the work of Parliament continued, it had an impact on the oversight on the oversight part of the work of Parliament. Because you remember the first 6 months of the announcement of COVID-19, we were unable to travel. There were too many restrictions, and yet government also had to continue doing its work. So the impact of COVID-19, you cannot rule it away.
It's far-reaching.
Parliament conducting its oversight.
It's far-reaching. So I would like to go back to what the president said in his 2021 speech, when he said that this is actually a defining moment for us to press the reset button. It is time for us to assess the entire state machinery to see how we can renew ourselves, not only as a nation from a social cohesion perspective, but also from in relation to addressing all the structural features of poverty and the, bringing about those structural reforms in the economy to make it easy for those who were previously marginalized to come into the mainstream economy and to enjoy a better quality of life.
I think what has been also encouraging listening is the fact that within the social compact, there's an understanding that municipalities, officials, political parties, they cannot do it alone.
Absolutely.
They cannot govern the country alone. So bringing in communities, bringing in the business sector, bringing in the NGOs, then it will enable everybody to find a better solution for the problems or the
challenges
issues
that we face as a
within
nation.
that context of each municipality. And we were just saying earlier on that the MEC of Finance from Gauteng, let me just get her name, but otherwise she's the only MEC at the moment. But she had indicated that the district developmental model, it has to start at the local municipality.
Absolutely.
And now viewers at home, the sitting has started.